Welcome, everybody. I'm Nick Morrows, I'm the mayor of the city of Plymouth. Thank you all for joining us here today on this important panel discussion about mental health awareness, mental health services, a variety of other services and stuff associated with really crises that affect just about every community. I'd like to thank GrowthWorks for organizing and starting this conversation with us tonight, and again, providing all the addiction services that they provide in this entire area, for being a great partner of the city. I'd like to thank PARC and Donovan and the crew for hosting this here at the fantastic new Wilcox Theater. So mental health crises, as I mentioned, they're affecting every single community, sometimes acutely, sometimes chronically, but really mental health crises happen from a tremendous variety of sources, whether it's addiction, whether it's some acute trauma that somebody has. And what's, I think, very noticeable is that during this past few years, the pandemic has not only lifted a veil on the challenges that our citizens face, that our community faces, associated with mental health services and such, but the fact that there's a significant amount of investment that can and should be made into these services in order for the well-being of all of our communities to really be top-notch and reach their potential. And as I mentioned, these causes of mental health crises can be varied. They can be acute, they can be chronic over time. That really lends itself to a need for a diverse set of services from a diverse set of partners in the community to help, whether it is, again, something that someone is facing for the very first time at an early age or at a late age, or it's something that they've faced sort of over the period of time. Having a series of partners that are providing services that are really important to help people when they're in most need is critical, again, to the well-being of the community. And I'm very happy today that we're going to have a panel of speakers that can represent various parts of this journey that people might be on in terms of the help that they can provide people in need, but also that we have a broad range of services in our community that are very important to this, and a commitment from this tri-community area, the Plymouths, the Northvilles, and Canton, in continuing to improve and invest in these services. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Laura Reiners from GrowthWorks. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. My name is Laura Reiners, and I serve as the Community Relations Director at GrowthWorks. We want to thank you for being here for this very important conversation, and we hope that this is the first of many and continued conversations so that you and others in our community know the services that are available to them. So first, I'd like to start with just a few thank yous. We'd like to thank all of those partners that made tonight's event possible: the City of Plymouth, Plymouth Township, Canton Township, Northville Township, the Plymouth Canton Community Schools, the Plymouth Arts and Recreational Complex, and then our creative partner, Coeus Creative Group. With that, I want to introduce our panelists for tonight, who are each going to say some words about how they're experiencing and how they're seeing the increasing need for mental health needs in their specific sectors, as well as answering just a few questions after the end of their panel discussion about what resources we can provide to you and other community members. So from the Canton Township Police Department, we have Director of Public Safety and Police Chief Chad Baugh. We've got the Livonia City Councilman Rob Donovan. We've got from Plymouth Canton Schools, the school psychologist Kathy Grotas. We've got City of Plymouth Mayor Nick Morrows. And then I will also be saying a few words on some of GrowthWorks services as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to have Councilman Rob Donovan come up and start the conversation.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Donovan. I'm from Livonia City Council, and it is an honor to be here. I'm pretty excited. Just a few days ago, we were doing this Livonia at our rec center with our mayor there. It was nice to hear the Plymouth mayor talking about the need and emphasis that communities can participate in and help with mental health. And it's great to have a partner like GrowthWorks doing that, and you're impacting multiple communities across Western Wayne County. So I like to talk about my personal family's history with mental health and how it's impacted us throughout my childhood and how it's impacted me currently today in my role as a city councilman, and why I think this is such an important issue that we as city leaders can tackle and talk about and get rid of the stigmas of mental health, not talking about it. And I'm passionate about it because my family's dealt with it for so many years on a very personal level, a level that's sometimes been very difficult to talk about because it's very personal to me, right? I mean, nobody wants to talk about issues in their household. Nobody wants to have such a very personal thing out in the public. Um, but I think in my role as a city councilman, it's important to tell my story because I think that so many of us across the country, across our state, and our community deal with a lot of those same issues, regardless of how much money you make, regardless of what city you live in. I think we can all think about someone in our family that struggles with mental health and how that impacts you. And that's impacted me from the time I was a little kid. My family immigrated to America from Albania in the 1980s, and growing up in my family, there was there's a family member that deals with mental health, and it's impacted all of us. And as a kid, it was kind of difficult to deal with. You're a kid, your parents are fighting all the time, and you don't want to talk about it, especially in a foreign immigrant family. You don't talk about that. It's embarrassing. You don't want anyone in the community to know, whether it be your church community, whether it be your friends at school, whether it be your neighbors. You don't want to know that your parents are fighting or you're having issues in the household. And it was a daily occurrence in my house. Always something was going on. And as the eldest brother, it was my duty to kind of shield my siblings from that and keep them away from that. And it was tough. It wasn't fun at all seeing your family going through the situation to the point where as I got a little bit older, I was arrested. I was falsely accused for domestic violence, and I had to go to jail for a couple of days. Now, thankfully, everything was dismissed and it was dropped. But as a kid, having to deal with that wasn't easy when it's coming from your personal family member that's dealing with with a difficult situation and has an episode, and you're the one that kind of catches the brunt of that. And that hurt as a kid. So, I'd finally escape from that, and I'd go to school, and I finally got away. I finally got to be myself a little bit, maybe, and be a class clown and get in trouble. And I don't know in the moment, but I have symptoms from the household that I'm finally able to escape. But fortunately enough for me, I was given the opportunity for something called the Youth Assistance Program because I'm getting in trouble at school. I got all this going on at home and it's difficult to deal with. But there was a youth assistance program that I knew nothing about, my family knew nothing about, and I bet a lot of people in the community didn't know anything about. And there's this opportunity to help this kid that's going on with some issues at home, and now he's taking those issues and turning them at school. And thankfully, I had public school officials at my school that said, "Hey, we need to help this kid out," and we had this youth assistance program to help guide me in the right direction. And I look back now in my role as a city councilman and say, we need to fund, we need to support these initiatives. We need to partner with organizations like GrowthWorks. We need to make sure that our school systems are able to get out there and identify the issues that kids are dealing with at home and help them out, because it could have just taken a different turn for me to not have the opportunity to go to the youth assistance program, and I don't know where I'd be in life. And I attribute, what I'm doing in my life now because there was a program that was able to help me as a kid, and there were counselors and people that understood that this is something that we need to handle, something we need to do to help this person out. And there were so many kids like me in this program, and a lot of people go on to do good things, and unfortunately some people still struggle. But there was a program that we were able to take advantage of and help kids. And likewise, there's programs that GrowthWorks and other communities have that can help adults as well, not just kids that are struggling. I think sometimes we as communities might not want to acknowledge that these programs are needed, but I think now more than ever, as city leaders, whether you're your police department or the elected officials or just organizations, need to acknowledge these programs, that not only do they exist, but they can help make a difference and an impact. Especially when you talk about public safety, our officers are consistently dealing with people that may not necessarily be a criminal, but they're in a very difficult position in life, and police officers have to do their job, and they don't have the luxury of, what if this person is not dangerous or not. Officers have to go home, and maybe if you have a strong program in the police department with partners like GrowthWorks and others, embedded social workers, etc., maybe they can help a use of force situation not get out of hand, and maybe just help that person instead of it turning into a criminal justice situation where someone's being hurt. So as a local elected official, I think it's super important to support organizations, because we can maybe stop a bad thing from happening and help a young kid out like me. And now looking at it from my perspective so many years later, I'm really passionate about it, and I want to help out any way I can as a person that's involved in the city level, because maybe we can help a young kid stay out of trouble, or maybe we can help an adult that's struggling so many years later turn their life around. And it's directly because of organizations like GrowthWorks and city leaders that take that initiative, and the police departments that take that initiative as well. So I'm very excited to see these organizations doing what they're doing. And unfortunately, I have to leave a little early tonight. We have a event at Livonia for a fallen officer. It's a memorial night, so I can't stay the entire time, but it was an honor to be here. And thanks to GrowthWorks and the public school systems and the elected leaders and the police departments for taking this issue seriously, and not only taking it seriously, but coming up with creative solutions to minimize future instances. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilman Donovan. Now we are going to hear from Kathy Grotas at the schools.
Hi, I'm Kathy Grotas. I'm a psychologist for the Plymouth Canton Schools, and I also work on their mental health initiatives. As a psychologist, we work with academic concerns, learning disabilities, and mental health concerns. The challenges we see, not only in our district, but our surrounding districts and nationwide, are the effects of the pandemic. We know that since the pandemic, we have seen an uptick in mental health concerns. The quarantine was needed to save our lives, but the effects it had on our students' mental health was significant. The students' new life is going to school and being involved in activities, socialization, being on sports and their clubs came to a complete halt. What the pandemic did do is bring about mental health awareness. We knew that mental health was always there, but the pandemic moved it to the forefront. The pandemic's effect on mental health, we see depression, an increase of depression. We see students feeling persistently helpless and lonely and feeling of emptiness, anxiety, the effects of what might happen, what could happen, and the isolation of fear. Social anxiety, the fear to go to school. We also see suicide thoughts and self-harm, as well as negative behaviors such as stress reaction, anger outbursts, and emotional dysregulation, and difficulty finding the motivation to do school and to be a part and disengaging with family and friends. The pandemic also promoted the increase of social media. We know that social media has always been around, but since the pandemic, we've seen an increase in social media, video games, and videos, and we know the negative impact it has on the developing brain. We've seen students go from moving around all the time to a secondary lifestyle where they had limited to no exercise, a decrease in their sleep, or sleeping all the time, and finding just the motivation to take part in things that they once found interesting. The Plymouth Canton Schools finds mental health very important, and we promote mental health support. Some of the ways we do that is we have a mental health professional in every one of our buildings. We implement social emotional learning at the elementary, and we have it in our middle schools and high schools in their advisory period. We talk about self-awareness, self-regulation, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. One of the most important and valuable tools is reaching out and partnering with mental health agencies. We know that it takes a community, it takes a village, and the schools cannot do it alone. Through the support of mental health agencies such as GrowthWorks and the other agencies, we have been able to offer virtual support groups for our students who have had loss. We had family presentation on grief and trauma. After the lockdown, we had debriefing support groups for our students and our staff. We have parent and family boot camps that talks about the dynamics of relationships between parents and students. And we support our students struggling with substance use, such as vaping. And our goal is to do more work with mental health agencies, family presentation nights on various topics that are interesting to parents and students. Our district trained our staff, our elementary staff, our middle school staff on QPR and suicide training. And this summer, we're working with GrowthWorks to do our non-teaching staff so that everyone would know the warning signs of suicide and what to do. We held our first annual mental health and wellness fair with the sponsorship of GrowthWorks as well as many others, and mental health support agencies as well as GrowthWorks, participating and offering resources, tips, and tools on how to stay healthy, where to go to get help, and to let them know with the community support that it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to talk about it. Normalizing mental health is important, and the pandemic's effects had significant effects, but it also made us more aware that we have to do more. So, Plymouth Canton Schools, we need the support of our mental health agencies working to create a wraparound service for our students so they can be academically successful as well as mentally and physically healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Next, we're going to have Director of Public Safety and Police Chief Chad Baugh.
Thank you, everyone. Again, I'm Chad Baugh, the Director of Police Services and Police Chief for Canton Township. Honored to be here. You know, looking at Laura, I was thinking back a few years ago, we were trying to come up with a plan to have actual resources for those that are in crisis, whether it's juveniles or adults. And we started with a diversionary program. We're talking about stigma and children. We know from studies and data, when law enforcement gets involved, there's sometimes our hands are tied, and children do have to go through the system. And GrowthWorks has been with us throughout all that time. They handle adjudicated youth of Third Circuit Court. We have a special relationship. They have a special relationship where they're allowed to handle the probationary activities for children from ages 10 to 17 for substance abuse, behavioral health. And the work that they do at the early onset is extraordinary. It helps change lives. You have a city councilman here that used maybe a portion of those services through his life and helped change his life. We see it quite often. We have a township clerk that's been very vocal about his history and how GrowthWorks impacted his life, where he's been very successful in his life too. You know, that's in place. You have a way to handle probation, and GrowthWorks has been there. In 1996, when I started this work, we were trying to find, we were trained. The only thing we had was this card, and it said GrowthWorks on it. And I was 20, 21 years old. I was like, I don't know, here's this card. They can help. And now it's really progressed. The work that Dale did at the onset, and now with Laura and her team with Nick, it's really progressed. We needed that other resource, like I opened up with. A way to divert children from going through that court process to end up with GrowthWorks anyway, to put them in the services immediately. And we found that with GrowthWorks, hey, let's set up a diversionary program, a pre-trial diversionary program where children who may have committed an offense, they can go right into services immediately. So we find that to be very important. There's probably a couple hundred children have been considered. We had some reasons that they couldn't qualify at the onset, and we've grown the program over the last year. So we're excited. We have a lot of support from our elected officials to grow that program. Also, when we were trying to come up with another way to help people in crisis, I sat down with actually Laura. She came up with this term. We're actually resource brokers. We're the police department, right? There are a lot of people, they don't have the opportunity to use maybe their medical care. They don't have medical care, or they don't know how to use it. They don't know how to manage. They're in crisis. So we went with GrowthWorks. We sat down, we talked about how do you handle this? And Laura came up with the term, you're a resource broker. And so we came up with an embedded social worker program. Livonia is using their model. It's very similar, where we're actually impacting the lives of citizens that otherwise we would just say, sorry about your situation and walk away from it. But the police now are interfacing individuals that are in crisis with a social worker that helps broker resources. Maybe it's substance abuse, maybe it's mental health issues, and primarily that's what the issues are. So just being creative and actually being what was asked of us many, many years ago back in England when they formed policing professionally is to be peacekeepers You know, we're not here to do anything but keep the peace and hold people accountable. We do that. But most often, we're called just to restore order. And sometimes people, their lives are in disorder. And our ability to have actual professionals that know what they're doing, people in this community that are experts in their field, we can help interface those in crisis with these individuals to change their lives. When you're dealing with children, which is the most important message I probably have tonight, GrowthWorks is the expert. And if you can catch them very early on, you might stop the more escalated events later on in life. So if that's maybe it might spur some thoughts tonight. I know we're going to have some Q&A, but we're always looking for community input because we have to find ways to adapt as a society, because I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, but we're experiencing a lot of extraordinary events in our country right now. And, you know, the situation over the weekend, that was just horrific. And it just goes on and on and on. But it's people like us, we're actually speaking to the choir most likely right now. But it's us that can help, you know, change some hearts and minds about how we attack stigma with mental health and substance abuse. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And next we're going to hear from Mayor Nick Morose.
So a couple of things stand out to me. And as I had mentioned earlier, the City of Plymouth is exceptionally committed to continuous improvement in providing these services that we know, yes, there's more and more of an uptick of this type of crisis because of the pandemic we've seen, but this has also been something that has been underinvested in our state, in our country, so on and so forth. And I think we now realize, partially because of the pandemic again, the amount of resources that are needed, even in some of these acute cases, it's pretty stark compared to previous models of addressing these things. Belinda Mack is in the audience. She is our embedded clinician. This is a program that Chief Baugh just mentioned, very similar to Livonian's program as well, that is having a social worker, somebody trained as a social worker that's dedicated to help us at a moment's notice when our emergency services, whether those be police, fire, or EMT, run into a situation in which there's a mental health crisis. Belinda is funded by a grant right now, which we're exceptionally proud to have. But this is something that we know we need in the long term for the stability and the well-being of our community. So transitioning some models in terms of how we think about how we fund public safety and so on and so forth into further investments that continue this type of service, that double down on this type of service, I think is now not simply responding to the crisis of the pandemic, but what should the new normal be, if I can use that terrible trope that was passed down through the pandemic. The other thing that I was kind of thinking about is, as Kathy mentioned, mental health crises can come from loss of sleep, not exercising and such. And if you're a parent in the audience, you have probably experienced this. I've got a 3-month-old right now, and I'm definitely in that boat. And that's just to say that, to point out that mental health crises can happen to really anybody. They can come at any time. And I think that's also something that we're now recognizing, that dispelling the stigma is not simply through saying, saying it's okay to be not okay is important, but also providing the resources in a way that they are community partners, that they're seen at our events, that people are aware of them, in the same format that community policing has received such praise in terms of, again, dispelling some of that stigma. I hope that we can move in that direction as well when it comes to mental health services. And again, marrying those two concepts, it's investing in this in the long term, and it's providing it in a community-driven aspect such that people see and are aware of these resources and know who's actually involved in it. I think that's most important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank all of our panelists who were courageous in speaking about their own experiences, but also pointing us in the direction of some of the resources that they know of and that they have made available through their own avenues. So I just want to take a few minutes to speak on behalf of some of the services that GrowthWorks offers in terms of our substance use treatment, our behavioral health, and then also working with some of the youth in the juvenile justice system. Give me one moment. This is what happens when you bring too many notes. So for those of you that do know about GrowthWorks, we've been in the community for over 50 years now. And if you do know about GrowthWorks, chances are you know us as a substance use treatment organization. And while we are that, over those 50 years, we've continued to grow in so many different ways. We've got case management for youth in the juvenile justice system. That also includes some juvenile diversion programs and also family services. And while we may not be initially seen as a mental health care organization, the mental health of our clients is so important. I was just in a meeting this week where we talked about, for our specifically the clients that come to us for substance use treatment, that 40% of those adults and 60% of the youth that are coming to us for substance use treatment, they also have some sort of mental health diagnosis. So we take that very seriously in terms of those are our clients. We want to treat the whole person. And sometimes it may just be the substance use that they're seeing us for, but mental health really may be at the root of the cause for why they're having issues with substance abuse. So the big thing that I do want to focus on today is our youth assistance program. GrowthWorks is one of the 5 care management organizations that serve Wayne County. GrowthWorks serve the Western Wayne communities. And really what we're doing is we're working with youth that really are having trouble. These are kids that are acting out. These are kids that have gone in front of a judge, that they've been formally adjudicated, and that we are having case management services for those kids. And because we've seen really what the impact of having long-term case management in some of our kids' lives, our team does an amazing job. But ideally, if we can avoid kids being in those services, that's what we want to seek out. So we provide early intervention and youth assistance programming for some of those kids, exactly like Chief Boss said, that these are kids that are starting to exhibit at-risk behavior. They're starting to act out, whether it may be vaping in school, being truant from school, or a number of other reasons. Typically, it's a first offense that we're able to work with those kids in our youth assistance program. And really what we're trying to do is not meant to be a punishment. It's meant to help get them the resources that they need. We're typically working with kids that are age 17 or 10 to 17, and really we're working on things like life skills. We're giving them mentoring opportunities. We're hopefully working with their parents if their parents want to be involved in the programming, and we've seen that that's very beneficial. But additionally, what we're doing is we're trying to get to the root cause of some of the issues. Typically, the reasons that they're getting in trouble with police or they're getting in trouble at school, that's not usually what's going on. And one of the other things that we focus on at GrowthWorks is a lot of trauma. A lot of the kids, a lot of the adults that we're working with, they've had some form of trauma in their lives, and trying to work on how do we support them? How do we create a comfortable environment so that they're interested in learning coping skills, interested in working on breathing techniques, other things that can help them. So it's how do they have a different reaction than a response in terms of some of the negative things that may be going on in their lives. Because I think all of us know, and COVID pandemic is a clear example of that, we cannot control the circumstances in our lives. But what we can do is we can work on how do we respond to those issues in our lives. So typically those programs are happening in a group format. They're happening in a peer-to-peer setting. And that's really important because the kids are then able to learn from each other. We also end up learning from the kids themselves. We're learning what's going on. What are they struggling with? Social media is a huge thing right now that a lot of them are struggling with. So how are we able to take that feedback and incorporate it into our program so that it's most beneficial for them? Most of those kids that are working with us, they're with us from 6 to 9 months. And the goal is that they're able to learn some of those skills so that when they do go back out into the community, that it kind of puts them back on the right track. And hopefully they're not seeing us in the more serious juvenile justice services. But probably one of the biggest things that Chief Baugh talked about as well is the program and the partnership that we have with Canton Township, that we have in the city of Livonia, and that we also have in Redford Township, is that early intervention. That's what's most important. I have young children at home. They're just at that age where discipline's starting to enter our household. But if I know if my daughter does something today and I don't discipline her until 9 months from now, she's not going to know what the heck I'm talking about. She's not going to know what the heck I'm talking about from earlier today. And that's the same with all kids. That's the same with all of us, that having that intervention as soon as possible is so important. And we all know that even prior to the COVID pandemic, there were challenges within our juvenile justice system getting kids in front of a judge, but that's only been exacerbated during the pandemic. Frequently, if there was a kid who had an issue that they had a ticket, they needed to go before a judge, it could be upwards of 9 months. 9 months, if you can believe that. So that kid, similar to my daughter, is going to be like, what the heck? And is probably, unfortunately, continued down that same path. So that's why it's so important, this early intervention, this youth assistance program, where typically, depending on the case, we can have someone who's had an incident happen, and sometimes even within a week, less than that, right around that amount of time, where they can be in services and hopefully getting right on that right path. So that's just one of the many programs that GrowthWorks offers. We're so glad to be a part of the community, so glad to be supporting all of you, and we just hope that we're able to continue serving the community for the next 50 years. So thank you very much.